Whoa! Oh, you need to stop it? Oh, you need to stop it? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to episode 3, where we concentrate on the Blue Crater power plant factory and building train tracks. Let's start with a view of the South Grasslands crater. As you can see, I have done some work on it, but mostly it is still untouched. That is going to change during this episode. First, we create a train track loop around the area. In retrospect, this was probably a bad idea, as it means a lot of my trains will have to circle this to get to another place, which in turn means more time traveling and less time delivering products. In the right corner, there is a train station that I was going to use for sulfur and coal transport, but I ended up just using it for sulfur. As for the train tracks, I do it by taking down vegetation on the ground, laying down foundations, then I add in the tree blueprints that I have saved for the train tracks, the pillar base, the hypertube hexagon, and then the train track top. In theory, this is a simple and easy process to do. We will talk about how it goes in practice shortly. Here is another look of the different train track parts, or at least the parts I had when I recorded this video. There have been a couple of modifications done to these, as some beams were missing and some other things also needed to be changed. Now, some of the problems with the train tracks involve things like pillars being too far apart. This is one of the things I encounter very often. When the pillars are too far apart, then the train tracks or the hypertube pipes will not connect. The only way to fix this is to bring the pillars closer or add a pillar to the middle. Another issue is that the train track falls too deeply or then it curves too much. Or when creating junctions, the train tracks differ in height, resulting in a functioning but an ugly railway split. Now, all this could be avoided by just carefully counting all the spaces between the pillars. Honestly, I have been spending so many hours doing this now that I can pretty much eyeball how far the pillars can be so that the connection of the train tracks is still possible. My original plan for this episode was to make a train tutorial, as I had finally understood how the train tracks work. Then I realized I don't know shit. So I recorded some video scenes involving some areas I have built for the tutorial, and a lot of these areas can be seen in the background in the upcoming clips. But they were really not used in the end for the tutorial, as I actually realized I'm not really qualified for making a train tutorial, as I really don't understand as much of them as I would like and should for such an episode. But hey, do enjoy this roundabout. I have already built another template that does the job in a much smaller space. As I was laying down the railway to the Blue Crater, I came across the Sulfur hill west of the crater. Since I was going to need the sulfur anyway, this was a good spot to stop, build a railway station, connect the geysers to the railroad to give it power, and set up the sulfur production as well. Something I always want to build but never actually use is a starter factory for my power production plants. To do this, I will need biomass burners, storage containers, dimensional depots, industrial buffers, a refinery, a packager, constructors, fuel-powered generators, programmable splitters, and a water extractor. Additionally, we might need some Mark II pumps as well. This is all in addition to the usual foundations, mergers, splitters, conveyor belts, etc. Also, learning from past mistakes, I will be building the geothermal power generators before I start laying down foundations. Water extractors with those geothermal generators will define the bottom layer of the said foundations. Once the starter power plant was built, I was going to tear this thing down, but as it happens, this place still stands. I have had neither the time nor the need to actually tear this old power plant down. However, this is a good spot to talk about a previous misconception that I have had. I said that the biomass burners do not use fuel unless there is power being drawn, and while this might be true, the constructors here are actually drawing power despite not producing anything. Apparently they draw 0.1 megawatt of power just by existing and being in sleep mode. Just so you know that these things will still be using your solid biomass reserves even if you are not using them. I was also missing the Mark IV conveyor belts. These are quite essential for a lot of the stuff we will be doing in the Blue Crater. To be honest, we would really need the Mark V in there, but alas, we work with what we've got. Just so you know, the trains have been changed so that you can now easily derail your trains for your amusement. There are buffer stoppers that can be added should you prefer not to do this by accident. At least I recall that the trains would just stop at the end of a track or station before version 1.1. Honestly, I have not been playing enough with these in the past to really remember if that was the case.
Whoa! Oh, you need to stop it? Oh, you need to stop it? Oh dear. Oh, I remember that it actually stopped.
The starter power plant is finished here. Well, some tuning is still in order, and I'm not making empty containers for the liquid biofuel in situ, but overall the factory system here is in working condition. The idea here is that I can bring in a train from anywhere with 2 cargo containers. They will unload them to buffer storages where the cargo will move into constructors. I have 2 constructors for mycelium, 3 for leaves and 1 for wood. The produced biomass then moves into another buffer container before being processed to solid biofuel by 3 constructors. Solid biofuel is then stored in a container buffer and sent to 5 biomass burners to make the system self-sufficient. Should the solid biofuel container be full, any excess solid biofuel is sent to 2 refineries. These process the solid biofuel to liquid biofuel, which is then sent to an industrial buffer for storage in case we need it later, or to a liquid biofuel packager that produces fuel for the jetpack. Solid biofuel and packaged liquid biofuel are both sent to a dimensional depot so that I can access them while exploring the planet. This area you are seeing has seen some modifications already, by the way, so don't be surprised should you see some future clips where this area looks a bit different. Starting the real power plant requires us to work with turbo fuel. First, we just need to research it. There is a reason for not building any fuel power plant before, and that is because the turbo fuel is just so much better than the fuel power generators. I would need to rip out most of the stuff here if I were to build these beforehand. And once I get the blender and a couple of alternative recipes, I will have to tear down the one I'm currently building. I honestly wouldn't really build this one either, but we do need the power to reach the next tier of items, or at least that is what I was thinking. Maybe it would have been easier and better to just go with fuel and then work my way to rocket fuel, skipping turbo fuel altogether. I may have to see if that is a viable way to do things in the next run. I'm also ditching the parachute for the jetpack now that I have a fuel source. This will finally give me the mobility I have been yearning for. It also makes working with refineries a lot easier. Alternate recipe wise, we also want the heavy oil recipe. This is the final look at the power plant once completed at this stage. For making compacted coal, I have 3 assembler lines to produce what I need. I think the way I am doing the conveyor belts here is a bit problematic, with the input being between the assemblers and 2 outputs being on the outside of the blocks. I should have reversed that to allow better flow of resources into the assemblers. Oh well, this will be ripped down eventually, so I'm not too worried about it, but I need to remember that and reverse it in the future. Behind the camera is where the coal nodes are. They are feeding directly into the conveyor belts, and then we have 2 trains bringing in sulfur. 1 freight car comes from the grasslands and 3 freight cars are coming from the west side of the crater. With this setup completed, we should be making 1080 compacted coal per minute. Well, there could be some hiccups with that, but it should be averaging to that amount. In the back on the right corner, we are making turbo fuel from 2 pure oil nodes. We turn the fuel into heavy oil residue with the alternative recipe, and then with another alternative recipe we turn that heavy oil into turbo fuel. There are more efficient recipes out there, but I lack those at the moment. The turbo fuel is then fed to 2 fuel power generator blocks. The one on the right has 38 generators. We should theoretically be able to run 40 of these, but I have found that the liquid system in this game tends to have some hiccups, meaning that you may lose some of the liquid in the pipes. Therefore, I prefer to lose some maximum power to get consistent and reliable power instead. The second fuel block in the center doesn't get enough compacted coal, so it only runs 24 generators fueled with turbo fuel and 3 generators burning regular fuel. Some leftover heavy oil residue is also turned to smokeless powder for offensive equipment production. According to this graph, I'm making 34 gigawatts of power, but that is not the full truth. The conveyor belts and buffers took a few hours to empty, and this graph eventually settled to a little over 33 gigawatts. Alright, I think that wraps up this episode. Now, there are still few things I should mention, like the fact that I eventually had to change the top of the train tracks to include 2 tracks to allow trains to pass each other. That was a super fun upgrade I had to do to the tracks, including the fact that then some tracks refused to connect for being too far apart.
Railroad track is too long. Are you freaking kidding me? Seriously?
Any changes to the power plant also take a few hours to fully settle, so a small change might cause instability to the power system, but you only see it after a few hours, so keep that in mind when making your power plants if you want to see a consistent flat line in your power production. But that is it for now. Thank you all for watching, and bye for now.